Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD.
Hello.
Hi, Kimmy.
Hi, Nikki. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. I am excited about this
Ooh, I
conversation.
am very excited. I'm very excited. And you know what? To kick it off, I have a question for you.
Of course.
Okay, so Kimmy, what is the only slave revolt that actually ended up creating an independent nation because it was successful?
Well, you've got to be talking about the Haitian Revolution of 1804.
Yes. So this is a very interesting topic because it
Mhm.
is the only time where slaves actually rose up, and not only did they eliminate slavery, but they ended up having an independent nation. So I think it's really important. It's something that I wasn't
And
taught in
defeated
school.
and defeated several
Yes,
superpowers of the time. We're talking
absolutely.
about
Yep.
Britain, Spain, and France.
Yeah,
I mean,
everybody wanted that little island. Everybody wanted it. And so
mhm.
they were able to maintain it. And it's definitely something that I wasn't taught. And I know that when we talked, you hadn't been taught it in
Yeah,
school. And so I think it's really important for us to dive in and think about this topic.
yeah. And I think that the topic came to mind because of that very issue. You know, with the internet and podcasting, you're exposed to, good things and bad things. But the good things is information. You're exposed to people from different countries, and so the idea came to me is because I follow a couple of podcasters who are Haitian, and it was, they just celebrated the Haitian independence, January 1st, right? Yeah. And so and when they were talking about something in my mind was like, well, why were we never taught this? And so I
Yeah.
thought that this would be a perfect topic for us to get deep on, so let's do it.
Yes. Let's move on and learn more about the Haitian Revolution and how it happened, what happened, and then what is our call to action. So let's get into it.
Yes.
Before we get into it, I think we need to say just a little bit about the history. So in 1492, our old buddy slash nemesis, buddy slash nemesis, Christopher Columbus, uh, took control of the island and named it Insula Hispania. And so pretty much Spain had the island, and then 1665 French colonization was a slavery-based agriculture, and the part that was called Haiti was called Saint Domingue, and it
Mm.
was known as the Pearl of the Antilles because it was just really rich with these sugar plantations. And so it was really seen as a benefit and as an economic provider. Spain ceded the remainder of Hispaniola to France. Uh, and we talked about this because I've always wondered about the Dominican Republic and Haiti,
Mhm.
one being Spanish speaking and one being French speaking. And so
Mhm.
this is where these things arose from. This is how this arose. And then in 1785, they had 1795, Spain ceded the remainder of Hispaniola to France. Um, so the other thing I think is important for us to talk about is that in 1767, that what Saint Domingue, which would then be called Haiti,
Current day. Mhm.
exported 72 million pounds of raw sugar, 51 pounds of refined sugar, 1 million pounds of indigo, 2 million pounds of coffee. And by 1780, they produced 40% of all the sugar and 60% of all the coffee consumed in Europe. And they had about 8,000 plantations, and they eventually produced half of the sugar and half of the coffee consumed in Europe and the Americas. So we want to say this, I think, because we want to understand why Saint Domingue / Haiti, why this place was really important and how just incredibly vital it was. And also
The French
between
economy.
exactly, and
Mhm.
for the French economy, and also between 1681 and 1791, 790,000 to 860,000 slaves. Also, there were some Native Americans enslaved in Louisiana who were sent to Saint Domingue because they had tried to have a slave revolt. So they were actually sent from Louisiana
Mm,
to Saint Domingue, or
mm,
what would be called Haiti. Um, and also, the other part is that slavery was in this area, but it was also in the United States, and the slavery was very different. And so I say that just to kind of set the stage.
provide that context. So
Yeah,
Haiti essentially was it provided an economic boom for France, right?
yeah,
So there's just there's so many layers to this idea of this fact of the Haitian Revolution, right? There's so many players. There were so many. There were so many. There was so much economics involved, um, politics involved, alliances, just all the things, right?
right.
Um,
All the things.
all the things. A couple of things. So, from my reading, you know, I feel like the pivotal moment that sort of set the scene for the revolution to eventually take place starts with the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, declaring all men free and equal.
Mhm.
And so this was in August of 1789, about 6 years before the kickoff
The kickoff.
of the slave revolt, because there was a smaller revolt that sort of stood out, that occurred before the revolt that sort of
Set the stage. Yeah.
the stage and set the facts in motion for the revolution to take place. That's one thing. And I think the other is uh, the ratio of slaves to white people and to free men of color, because there was this caste system
Yeah.
in place where you had, of course, obviously you had white people, and then they even they broke white people down to big whites and little whites, like
Yes, I
literally.
saw that.
The
Yes.
English translation of what they were called is big whites and little whites. And,
Right.
context clues, big whites, you know what that means. And little whites, they supported the big whites in maintaining slavery of the Africans. So the other thing is that, so the Africans who were the slaves doing the work, managing and, uh, um, managing the production of the sugar and the coffee and all the things, outnumbered big whites, little whites, free people of color, or free men of color, because women just weren't even
Women weren't even considered. I mean,
about. They outnumbered them 8-1.
right.
So there were around 50,000 whites. I can't remember if it was big and little whites.
I have it here. I believe so yes. I think combined it was
And
about
combined, yeah, I think
50,000
so too.
whites. Yeah. And then the slaves, they had about 406 to 465,000
Thousand.
slaves
Yes.
by 1789. Now there
Yep.
were a lot more before, but when
Yeah.
we're talking about 1789,
Yeah.
we're thinking right before the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said ex-slaves and Creoles of color, they had
Mm-hmm.
about 28,000 to about 32,000 of
Mm-hmm.
those. So,
So, so the slaves outnumbered. And what's different from our American understanding of slavery is that most of the slaves in Haiti were African,
right.
meaning they weren't born in Haiti. They were slaves because they had to keep replenishing their slave labor because of two reasons. The process for producing sugar and the things that they produced, the work was backbreaking, um, and the incidence of yellow fever.
Right.
So because the life of a slave was so short.
And Kimmy, I actually read that it was between 1 and 3 years. The Africans would arrive and they would be dead within 1 to 3 years. And because of the back breaking, they'd be worked to death.
They would be worked to
Worked to
death.
death.
Yes. And so what you have though, as a result of that, is you have, because most of the slaves were actually from Africa, they had a better sense of community. They had a better sense of their community. I'm
Right.
talking
Right.
their culture, communication with each other. So it definitely set the scene for them to be able to organize in a way to successfully revolt against the big
Right.
and little whites.
And I think if you're importing slaves from Africa, you're importing people who were a lot of times free, and some of them were captured in wars within Africa and then sold, but some of them were free. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's different like in America where we had a lot of slaves who were born on a plantation, so they were
Yeah,
born into
into it.
slavery, so they
Mm-hmm.
never really had a taste of what freedom really felt like.
Yes.
And even in my reading, I read about how the persons would go and they would negotiate with people to get slaves of different ethnic groups because they had this list of, well, the people from here are quiet. Like I believe it was Benin, like they were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be the really quiet,
Mm-hmm.
studious ones. And then there were
Mm-hmm.
some, they said that folks from, and I believe they said it was a certain grouping in Nigeria. They
Mm-hmm.
were people who would rather die than be enslaved, and so they wanted to try to get more of the quiet people that they perceived that their culture was more quiet, and so they even had a list of the type based on ethnicity that they wanted because of their perceived benefits
Yeah,
within the different communities.
and their
Yes,
disposition.
and also their
Mm-hmm.
skills because
Mm-hmm.
people talk about slaves being unskilled, but folks had a lot of
That
skills.
doesn't even make economic sense.
It
Like,
doesn't make
we know that
economic sense.
slavery was for purposes of money. So why would you bring several hundred thousands of people over who have no
No
skills?
skills, right?
That's
Right.
just stupid. So you know, it's
I love that. I love that very academic word. That's just stupid.
like, there's no better word for it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It
Oh,
doesn't make sense.
like, you're
Right.
playing in my face right now.
Exactly.
So I think, that you made a good point about how, um, there's a certain set of people in Nigeria who would rather die than be a slave, and that lends itself to the tactics that the Africans in Haiti implemented to be successful in the revolution,
Right. Right.
because a majority of them were of that mindset, because like you said, a lot of them were already free from
Right. Yeah.
wherever they were in Africa, and they had that mindset of, I'm not living like this.
Yeah.
I would just rather die, and I'm gonna burn the what you
And
say,
I will burn it down.
I'm gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm gonna throw the tub out too. And that's
Right.
pretty much, their strategy. So go ahead. 'Cause we can talk about this
Oh,
forever. I mean, but go ahead.
oh yeah, because it's just it's really important, I think. And there are all these nuances and these things.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I really want our viewers to think about would be that it's not just about race and it's not just about class, but it's a combination of those. Because
Mhm.
there were these four groups, and you mentioned
Yeah.
the big whites, the little whites, the free people of color. And I'm saying free people of color, but they really were considered free men of color because women, they were whatever.
It wasn't even.
They
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
didn't even exist. And
Yeah.
then the slaves, the
Mhm.
enslaved folks.
Yeah.
So the free people of color or the free men of color, they had slaves, they had plantations, and it was really beneficial to them to maintain the institution of slavery because they were also getting rich off of the backs of other people. And the free people or the free men of color were educated, they had money, they had wealth. They really rivaled the big whites, but they didn't have rights. They didn't have voting rights. They still had that barrier based on class. So
tell our
you,
listeners what happened after, because we kind of have to hit those high points too. So tell our listeners about what happened after that pivotal moment in 1789 when France was like, okay, all men are created equal.
right.
There was that other revolt. So
Yes, there was
you
this
remember
revolt,
those details.
the revolt before the revolt. And what
Yeah.
happened was there was a free man of color, and I believe his name was Onye, Vincent Onye. And
Okay.
what happened is that, he became aware of the Declaration of Man, right? And so he actually went to France to talk to them. He took a group of free men of color, and they actually talked. And he spoke. And even the writing from the time, people wrote at how eloquently he spoke to them about the importance of him having his rights and free men of color having their rights. And people were really impressed because they had never witnessed a person of African descent um, that could just that was so eloquent. Okay.
Orate.
Yes, orate so eloquently.
Uh-huh.
So, but they did not say that they were going to give him rights. They said that they said something very that wasn't exact. They said, okay, all citizens can have rights, but there's still questions about whether
Mm-hmm.
blacks were considered citizens. So,
Right.
in other words,
Right.
he did a great job, but he did not get what he really sought, which was to be treated equally and to have rights.
But at the
So,
same
as a
time, still
result,
had the slaves though.
and he still had slaves, true. So
Mm-hmm.
he went back to Saint Domingue slash future named Haiti, and he was so angry. So he pulled together folks, and they actually had an uprising. Now, one of the things that's really important to mention is that there was a question about whether he was going to arm the slaves. And he decided not to arm the slaves. Now, I always think, like, as I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, what would have happened had he armed the slaves? So he didn't arm the slaves, and someone, I think there was someone who really disclosed to France what he was doing, and his revolt was crushed. And what they did is he was executed, and he was broken
Famously.
on the wheel and
Mm-hmm.
beheaded. And broken on
Mm-hmm.
the wheel, if you don't know what that is, please look it up. It's a horrible way to die because France had some very horrible uh, ways to die that not only kill people but terrorize the people
Mm-hmm.
around them. So
Sadistic.
then he
Very.
was beheaded. His head was put on a stake, and people could see it. Now, what that did was it made people really angry because he was this free man of color who was really well respected.
Huh?
And that really planted some seeds
Yeah.
because then, free people also knew, remember, they knew about the Declaration of Man. They knew that there was at least some place on earth where it had been declared that people could
Every
have their
man.
rights.
Yeah.
Every
Every man
man could
is
have
free.
rights. Yes.
Mhm.
And we're I don't think we're going to talk about this a whole lot in this episode, but the French Revolution also, the Declaration of Man, like all of this,
Yeah.
also had a part in Haiti, the Haitian Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
different ideas that came out were the impetus for people standing up and saying, "Hey, wait a second, what about me?"
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so he didn't. So Vincent Oyer didn't arm the slaves, but when the actual revolution occurred in Haiti, guess what?
They
They
armed
learned from
themselves.
Vincent Oyer and they armed the slaves. And not
Mm-hmm.
only did they arm the slaves, but they had strategy.
Yeah.
They had a
And
strategy.
it it was a violent revolution, and
Extremely.
I can't say that the violence wasn't warranted based upon the level of evil that took place in the institution of slavery there in Haiti. And and so there were so many quotes that stood out to me from so the person who sort of started the revolution is you kind of look at it like a what do you call that race where you hand the baton off, the relay.
Oh, a relay.
It was
Yeah.
almost like a relay. So the first part of the revolution was Toussaint, what was his first name?
Francois?
No, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his first name. Louverture.
Oh, I thought that was his last name. I thought his name was Toussaint Louverture.
Toussaint Louverture, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So Toussaint Louverture, he was the general in the first several years of the revolution, and he led the fight, right? And so when we're talking about this, we're talking about General Toussaint Louverture led this revolution against three superpowers. You've got to get that in your. I want the listeners to understand that this is a revolution that succeeded against Britain, Spain, and of course France. Because Britain and Spain, they decided they wanted to get involved in it, and they didn't want that smoke. They couldn't handle the smoke that came to them. And what I thought was interesting, just even about the article that I was reading, or one of the articles that I was reading about it, I question even that, right? Because so the article that I read, really focused on the fact that when the British soldiers, when they were sending their soldiers over to Haiti to deal with this situation, and don't forget, Haiti was the most profitable colony.
The Pearl of the Antilles, remember?
Yeah, out of all of them.
Yeah.
And France had it, right? So that's why Britain and Spain wanted to get involved as well, and they wanted to maintain slavery. But then you had this French Revolution where there were people who didn't want to, they've got this all men are equal, right? So we've got that, that sort of idea that's creeping into the minds of the slaves, especially in Haiti. So you've got General Toussaint, and he is leading this battle against all three. The article that I read really focused on yellow fever. So when they were sending their soldiers over, they were like, oh yeah, all the soldiers, they were dying because of yellow fever, child. Just the yellow fever.
It wasn't because of any strategy. It was just yellow fever.
It was yellow fever that was taking them out. I'm sure that part, obviously, when, you're talking about the early 1800s, disease, we didn't have the research. We weren't as advanced in medicine. So certainly, I'm pretty sure they had some casualties, but I definitely feel as though there was a focus on that probably wasn't accurate. I think they were putting a little extra sauce on the fact that yellow fever.
It didn't. It sounds like the article didn't place value on the strategery.
Yeah,
if that is a word.
No,
the strategy and the ability for a group of free men of color and slaves, enslaved folks, to really organize.
Remember the Maroons?
The Maroons, yes.
And these are people that revolted like in different small areas, and the way that they attacked their masters was never before seen, right?
Yes.
It was because you mentioned, we were talking before, this sort of guerrilla warfare.
Guerrilla warfare, yes.
That white people in France and Britain and Spain
they had never seen that.
It was they had these little factions.
Out of the ordinary.
These factions of slaves who would revolt, and the masters would be like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna leave them over there.
Leave them. They would go to the mountains.
Yeah, because they would go out to the mountains and then they would attack. Like they would, and so they didn't even want to go after them. Like they were just like, oh, they just need to be over there for a little while and get some of that aggression out. But we're not gonna mess with them. And so you had that as well. And so That was the theme. And so then you had Toussaint, who organized it, strategized it, and really defeated or began the process of
Right.
defeating those superpowers through this sort of scorched earth tactic.
Yes. And I definitely think we want our listeners to know about the scorched earth, because from the very beginning, when this large scale Haitian Revolution happened, they burned the plantations, and that was a symbol. That was a sign. Like, people were waiting. When they saw that fire, they knew, burn your plantations, kill your masters.
And this is the quote. So the quote that I wanted to read. So this is a letter that Toussaint wrote to, and I feel like Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. I think he must have been like another general or
Yes, I
something
I
like that.
think he was he, if I remember correctly, he may have been like second in command or something.
He had to be,
But
yeah.
he was prominent in the
Hmm.
fight.
Yeah. And so the letter that Toussaint wrote to him says, "Do not forget, while waiting for the rainy season, which will rid us of our foes, that we have no other resource than destruction and fire. Bear in mind that the soil bathed with our sweat must not furnish our enemies with the smallest sustenance. Tear up the roads with shot. Throw corpses and horses into all the foundations. Burn and annihilate everything in order that those who have come to reduce us to slavery may have before their eyes the image of the hell which they deserve."
Woo! Woo! I mean, that's ha. Woo. I
Yeah.
felt that.
Yeah. I felt it when I read it. And so I was like, okay, I have got to fit this into our discussion because that's what the revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also, so I read a lot about people saying, well, these people were brutal. They were so brutal and they were horrible, and they killed, because they said they killed
Yeah.
anyone with white skin was killed. They killed babies, they killed elderly people. They killed everyone. And
Everyone.
I think, putting things into context, we have to remember the harsh, brutal, inhumane treatment that the enslaved folks had, and the free people of color, or free men of color. Um,
Mhm.
so this whole environment was a harsh, hard hell, right? I mean, it was a
It's your,
bad
yeah, it's your
it
comeuppance. It's your
it
karma.
yeah, it was a brutal environment. I mean, and so these things, people said these things. I mean, that just speaks, I think, to the horrors of slavery,
Yes,
and them they would rather do these things to prevent going back to that situation. And so
exactly.
when you think about it from that perspective, I mean, it's like, wow. I mean,
Yeah. And
what?
so they were successful.
Yeah, they were
So
successful.
we're leaving out a lot, but so so the independence, uh uh the sort of mark of of them getting their independence was on January 1 of 1804.
Hmm.
And that's where, so Jean-Jacques Dessalines, he was the anchor leg uh in the
In the relay.
yeah, in the Haitian Revolution relay. And he sort of declared that Haiti was an independent nation and that the French were barbarians, and he demanded their expulsion and vengeance for their crimes. Essentially, that's the mark of the independence.
Yeah.
So what? And then what happened?
So, Kimmy, and I believe this was in 1825. That after the revolution, people stood up and said, we're not going to take this. We are a free nation. um, France said, okay, well, we will acknowledge you as a free nation, but you're going to pay us. And so what ended up happening is that they ordered Haiti to pay 150 million francs, and the first annual payment was 30 million francs. Now, I want you to think about this. The first annual payment was 6 times more than Haiti's yearly uh, revenue. So in other words, it was this exorbitant amount of money that they were asked to pay. And
To pay for the slaves that they lost as a
yes,
result of the slaves asserting their rights to
to
be
be free. Yep.
free.
It was so in other words, France had benefited from free labor.
Yes. And they wanted to be paid
And they wanted to be
for
paid because now they don't have the source of free labor.
Oh my God, yes.
And not only do they want to be paid, but they want to be paid an amount that is so unrealistic. And when we think about debt and we think
Mm-hmm.
about Haiti and the Dominican Republic,
Mm-hmm.
we think about where they are right now.
Right.
And Haiti, when we look at the Haitian economy and what's happened to Haiti, um, when we think about it from this lens, we can say, okay, wait a second. They started so far behind because of this debt.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, and the other thing is, I want to say America's not out of this discussion because
Oh, of course.
America in the was it 1920s?
Mhm.
America actually assumed some of the debt from not assuming the debt. They assumed
They bought the
they
debt.
bought the debt. They bought the
Mhm.
debt. Yes, they bought the
Like a
debt.
debt collector, like your modern day debt collector.
Exactly.
They,
So
hmm
Citibank is one of the names mentioned that actually benefited from this. And so yeah, so we could talk, we could go on and on
Yeah,
and on.
because the question too is, why would Haiti agree to this? You already you took your independence. So why do you feel like, oh, okay, so we did all this over a decade of bloodshed, fire, strategy,
We lost
intelligence,
so many people. We
people,
lost so many people.
and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we do owe you some money. Like that doesn't make any sense
It
to me. Like
so we probably need to look into that and do some more research, and
research, yeah,
maybe we'll come back with a part two one of
part
these days.
two,
Part
yes.
two.
We're 32 minutes.
Woo! What is our call to action?
Yeah,
Our call to action, and I'm going to say this, you've heard it before, educate yourselves. Because I did not know anything about this when we talked about history. And it's really important because we're always, when we hear about enslaved people, we
Mhm.
always hear about them being uneducated and that
Yes,
they don't have any skills.
yes.
And that is not the reality.
Mhm.
Here you have enslaved people who actually rose up and were able
Mhm.
to defeat
Mhm.
major armies.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so we need to understand that history. And so if you
Mhm.
are a person who has children, it's important that you find out what is your child's school
So,
teaching. Is
yeah.
your child's school teaching them this? Do they understand this? Are they, and this ties into America too.
Mhm.
Because when we think about like the 1800s and we think about slavery and the revolution going on in Haiti, and then we have slaves in America and France and enlightenment, all these different things going on, it really ties into not just world history, but also as Americans we need to understand this as well.
Mhm.
And so education.
Yes. And then French reparations to the people of Haiti. We
Yes.
talk about reparations here. They I feel like Haiti as a country is entitled to reparations from that um heinous deal, if you can call it a deal,
Right.
that was
Yeah.
reached, and predatory this predatory debt,
The
what is this,
predatory
the birth,
lenders.
yeah, this is the birth of the predatory loan. Yeah, so definitely the reparations discussion is necessary, it's in this context and in many others, but we're not talking about many others at this moment. But yeah, absolutely. Because they were paying this entire time, which
They were
lends
paying.
itself to their current economic infrastructure being what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they were paying, they, they could have been using that money to develop their infrastructure. They could have been using this money to really help to spearhead relationships with other countries.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that could have happened.
Because how do you go from being the wealthiest source? I mean, the largest source of income as a colony to now you're destitute. Like
Yeah.
it just the math ain't math in there.
Exactly. Not mathin'. Right.
Yeah.
And, the whole idea of someone asking you to pay because you were giving them free labor and you decided, correctly so, that you weren't going to give them free labor anymore.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's ridiculous. So let's move on to our final segment, which is our favorite. We'll kind of go through it pretty fast because we've kept you on the line for a while on this episode. Tell me something good.
Tell me something good. But you know what? We have to sing it.
Okay.
It will just take a few seconds. It's important, right? It's important.
It is. Okay.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Tell me something good.
Yes. We're getting better.
We're getting better. We're getting better.
So what's that? What's the tell me something good?
The tell me something good is that the debt was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
The debt was canceled. It took a long time. And so the good thing is that the debt was canceled.
In 2016.
Yes. And now we can, or, folks can start thinking about, okay, now what? So the debt was canceled. Now what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there investment opportunities in Haiti? How can we participate in Haiti's infrastructure? There's lots of questions. And I think that, this topic is laden with subtopics and issues that deserve attention, and history that we need to know and to learn from.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of where we are with it at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
yeah. Well, this was a great topic. It really, it really, it was just really inspiring to hear about enslaved folks rising up. It was just very inspiring. Getting organized and
working
together. That was really inspiring. I mean, of course, that does not negate all of the bad things. But I think it does say that a lot of the stereotypes that you hear about folks that look like us, a lot of the stereotypes that you hear
are not true.
Are not true.
Okay,
good.
Yeah. All right. So until next time, everybody, like and subscribe.
Let
us know what you thought, what your thoughts are about this topic, and we enjoy your comments. And until our next episode.
Oh, and you know what, Kimmy? If there are any of our listeners that are from Haiti, we would love to get your thoughts. And what are you all taught in schools? How are you all taught about this in school? And are you all taught about the American Revolution? So, just kind of what do we know about each other? And
I would be interested to know what
I'd be very interested. So please, let us know. Like and subscribe.
Okay.
All right. Till next time. Bye.